Welcome, future educators. If you want to build truly amazing learning experiences for your students, you've got to master the language of our profession. So in this explainer, we're going to demystify the essential teaching toolkit, methods, techniques, and strategies.
Let's start with this really powerful idea from Bertrand Russell. It gets right to the heart of our entire discussion because it asks a fundamental question. Are you a filler of vessels or are you a gardener of minds? Seriously, your answer to that question is going to shape every single choice you make in the classroom.
Okay, so as a teacher, you are going to hear these three words: method, strategy, technique, constantly. And a lot of the time, people use them interchangeably, but they mean very, very different things. Getting clear on them is the first big step from just being a person who talks in front of a class to becoming a true designer of learning.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by unpacking your teaching toolkit. Then we'll look at two big competing philosophies. After that, we'll do a deep dive into the teacher-centered approach, weigh its pros and cons, and then, finally, we're going to put it all together.
All right, let's jump in. Section 1, your teaching toolkit. Let's define the core concepts that every single teacher has to know.
First up is your method. I want you to think of this as your big picture philosophy. It's your North Star. It's the overall plan that guides everything you do, and it answers that fundamental question. Will you, the teacher, be the main focus, or will your learners be? This is your guiding principle.
Next up, we have techniques. Now, if the method is the what, then techniques are the how. These are the specific, practical actions you take in the classroom. We're talking about things like using a case study, holding a group discussion, or maybe running a quick drill. They're the individual building blocks you use to construct your lesson.
And finally, your strategy. This is how you bring it all together. It's your plan of attack. Once you've chosen your method and you've picked your techniques, your strategy is the deliberate order you put them in to hit your lesson's goal. It's not just what you do, but when you do it.
And this slide, it just lays it all out perfectly. You see the flow? You start big with your overarching philosophy. That's your method. Then you zoom in and select your tools, your classroom activities. Those are your techniques. And finally, you organize those techniques into a smart, coherent plan, and that is your strategy.
Now for Section 2. Let's talk about the two big philosophies, teacher-centered versus learner-centered. Basically, every teaching method out there is shaped by one of these two fundamental belief systems about how people learn. So let's break them down.
So, on one side, you've got the teacher-centered approach. This is the classic sage on the stage, right? The teacher is the main source of knowledge. But on the other side, you have the learner-centered approach. Here, the teacher becomes the guide on the side. This philosophy sees students as active participants who build their own knowledge. It's all about their curiosity and working together.
And you can literally see how these philosophies shape the actual classroom. I mean, look at this. The teacher-centered approach on the left, it leads to that traditional setup, focused on individual work. But the learner-centered approach on the right creates this vibrant, collaborative space built for discovery and interaction. Your philosophy actually shapes the room.
Okay, Section 3, the teacher-centered approach. Now, to really understand the shift towards these newer learner-centered models, we've got to do a deep dive into the traditional method first. We need to understand its foundations, its assumptions, and frankly, why it's been the go-to method for so long.
This slide is so important because it gets to the core beliefs behind the teacher-centered method. It basically operates on the idea that students are empty vessels, and the teacher is the expert who comes in and fills them up. It's a huge contrast to the learner-centered view, which assumes students walk in the door with knowledge and ideas of their own.
So, if you hold those assumptions from the last slide, then these characteristics make perfect sense, right? The teacher controls everything: the content, the pace, all the techniques. In a learner-centered room, by contrast, that control is shared. Students might have a say in the topics or in how they want to show what they've learned. It's all about building their independence.
So you might be wondering, well, why would anyone use this method? The answer, in one word, is efficiency. When you have to get through a massive amount of content really quickly, especially to prep students for a big standardized exam, this approach can be a super effective way to transmit a lot of information to a big group of people.
All right, Section 4. But of course, no single method is perfect for every situation. So, let's take a balanced, honest look at the advantages and disadvantages of this approach.
This table gives us a really clear side-by-side view. On the plus side, it's fast. The teacher has a ton of classroom control, and everybody gets the exact same information.
But the downsides are pretty big. The learners are passive, their own interests are totally ignored, and this can lead to boredom or kids acting out. And these disadvantages, they are precisely what the learner-centered approach was designed to fix.
Okay, last section. Putting it all together. We've talked about all the theory, now let's see how a professional teacher actually designs a lesson in the real world. Let's apply that planning hierarchy we talked about, but this time to the learner-centered philosophy. Okay, step 1. Our method is learner-centered. That means the focus is on student activity. Step 2. We need techniques that get them active. So we pick a case study for some real-world problem solving, a role play to build empathy, and a group discussion so they can build ideas together. And finally, our strategy is how we sequence them. See? Method, techniques, strategy, all working together to empower the student.
And here's the key takeaway from all of this. Your value as a teacher isn't just about what you know. It's about your skill as an architect of learning. It's about thoughtfully and intentionally planning how your students are going to engage with the material and build their own understanding.
And that brings us to the final and honestly the most important question. This one's for you. You now have the foundational language. You have the core concepts. You've got the toolkit. So as you move forward into your own classroom, you have to keep asking yourself, what is my method? What are my go-to techniques? What's my strategy going to be? What kind of learning experience will I design?